Minister Joe McHugh, good morning.
Good morning, Damien.
What's the weather like up in Donegal this morning?
I think it's the same as the sunny southeast. It's misty, so I'm working on the basis that this might be an omen for a bit of better weather over Easter. So here's opening. So just hello to all your listeners in the southeast, and we're doing good up here.
It's good to talk to you. You were Minister for Education. Can I ask you first personally, how are you doing? How are you keeping? How's the family doing?
Yeah, we're doing good. I have 3 kids at primary school, and I'm in a room now on my own, and they're doing their homework, and they're getting a lot of work. The feeling of being off school disappeared within minutes when they came home the day the school was closed a couple of weeks ago. And the big thing here, and I know this is what parents are trying to do in a big way, is to try to get routine, even if it's only for a period of the day or a couple of periods of the day. So routine's the big one, and young people like that discipline as well, and they like that direction. And what we see is that even the older lad who's 10, he's looking for that discipline every day. There was one Friday we weren't going to give them work, and he wanted it, so it's good. Yeah, we're doing good.
Yeah, but some children like lounging around in their pyjamas and playing PlayStation all day as well, don't they? You have to do a little bit of that as well, though. You have to balance it off, don't you?
I think it is, and look, I think not everybody lives in the country, and I'm conscious. A lot of your listeners living in, say, Waterford City, they don't have the freedom of living in the countryside, or may have different challenges. But look, even as a lad from Limerick who's training hurling up in Donegal here, he sent a message to the group saying, take the sliotar and the hurl out to the side of the house, when you get a chance. There's things you can do on your own with a bit of limited space too.
There is, very much so, yeah. We're not going to get a chance to go through all the particular questions. We've so much to talk about, Joe, and I appreciate you taking the call this morning from us. So we're just going to hit a couple of very specific points. Firstly, obviously, your own particular job, education, Minister for Education. You were on Galway Bay FM, and you were talking about the fact that schools are not going to reopen before Easter, and then we've got the Easter holidays. I know we don't like speculating, and the government doesn't like speculating. Would you be able to give a percentage in terms of your own personal thoughts about how things are looking for May?
Well, look, it's not to use football parlance, but one game at a time, and we're nearly working in a 1 day at a time scenario, and my focus hasn't deviated in terms of the exam subjects, and my focus is very, very much on making these exams happen in June, and that is for the junior cert, and that's for the leaving cert. So that's the fixed position that we're working towards. But because there's so many varying factors, we have to do a lot of scenario planning, and we're looking at all options. But the most important thing in the message for the young people who are studying this morning, studying for their leaving cert, is we're still on schedule for June, and we're going to move mountains to make that happen, and whatever needs to be done, we've already
I know,
started.
yeah. And I get
conversations about health.
Again, any interviews I've done with politicians during this, Minister, are not from a political perspective. They're just from a purely information perspective. So we're not playing politics with this whatsoever. I'm not trying to get a headline from you or anything. But I presume you are planning, one of the scenarios is for the leaving cert not to go ahead.
Believe it or not, that is the one scenario that we've sat around the table with my officials and the Secretary General. That's the one we want to avoid. That is.
I understand that, but I presume it's been planned for.
Well, it's, to be honest, we feel there'd be a natural injustice as a collective, and I'm talking about my officials and also speaking to the likes of my colleagues. As you say, we're not political. I spoke to Donald O'Leary, Sinn Féin spokesperson in education yesterday, Thomas Byrne, I've been speaking to as well, and Catherine Martin, and we're all focused on making these happen. And one of the things that we have to provide for not just leaving cert students, but also communities and parents, we have to ensure that we give them the hope that we're going to get through this.
I understand.
And our big ambition is to flatten this curve and be in a position to have them in school maybe a couple of weeks before the leaving cert.
Again, I understand, Minister, and again, I'm not trying to play politics with this whatsoever. Just a few specific questions, because there are parents listening to this and there are children listening to this, and it's one of the things that you want to avoid. You want to make sure that it doesn't happen. But, and we're all fully with you on this, but I presume one of the scenarios you have to be contemplating is the fact that it may not happen.
Well, look, Damien, this is the fourth time you're asking me the same question, and you're asking me a question which is a hypothetical worst-case scenario. We don't know what's going to happen over the next few weeks. I don't know the extent of what position our country will be in over the next few weeks. And obviously, at every given time, with every given scenario that's completely out of our control to an extent, we have to prepare for everything. But one of the things, and I'm saying this quite clearly, one of the things that we're not preparing for is not to have this leaving cert, because I know that there's young people, young men and women now, they're studying, and I don't want them to be remembered as the class of 2020 that didn't have to do their leaving cert or didn't do their leaving cert, because they don't want that. They're the ones that's knuckling down now. They're the ones that's working closely with their teachers. And can I make a point in relation to the teachers? The teachers and leadership coming from schools, they are so strong on this issue. They feel an obligation, and there is a determination. And then very interestingly, Damien, the teachers, it's not just post-primary teachers that want this to happen. Primary school teachers want it to happen. So I think there's a collective focus
I'd agree.
on making this happen. And I think, and my belief is that not alone will these exams happen, but I know that this group of students will be remembered as the students where everything was thrown against them, their preparedness, their time management, their focus, their purpose, everything was thrown up in the air. But we're duty bound to honour and feedback what they're doing this morning. They're studying, they're still focused on it, and we have an obligation to follow through. And that's why I'm going to move mountains to ensure those exams happen this June.
And I don't doubt you whatsoever on that. Specifically on the announcements yesterday by An Taoiseach, do you think that this is a staged process to something further, or are you of the belief, as a minister of the government, that this will be enough, that we won't need a full lockdown?
I think the way Ireland has been going has been nothing short of phenomenal in terms of the public reaction. And if you look at even the average age of people who are contracting coronavirus and have COVID-19, it's in around 45. So that's saying quite clearly that a lot of our elderly population have been in lockdown and isolation for a couple of weeks at this stage. So the public has already responded phenomenally to this. And what we're looking at now, yes, yesterday was another intervention based on medical advice and Tony Holan's leadership and his team. And if the way this is working and the way that the scenario that has been developing here, if things are needed at a particular juncture, that will be done. Because last weekend, we all heard, and no difference to South East and North West, it was the best day of the year so far. People wanted to get out of the house. And I know one couple who said to me that they messaged me last night, and they said the reason why they went to a particular beach is because they thought, and a particular part of the beach, because they thought they'd be the only ones there.
Yes.
But as it turned out,
everybody thought
there.
the
So
same.
that's why this had to be an intervention yesterday.
Okay. A couple of very specific questions, if you don't mind, ministers. I know we're going to have to go very shortly. You know these drive-through or drive-in test centres that are being set up around the country. What happens if you don't drive?
That's a good question. I mean, I know, for example, in Letterkenny, St Eunan's GA Club, Letterkenny's a good distance from Mallinhead. That's a very good question.
You don't have an answer. That's fair enough. I'm not trying to catch you out. I've just literally somebody texted me there just as we were on air, because appointments are only drive-through, so you have to.
No, but I'm just thinking if that person from Mallinhead lives on, say it's an elderly person living on her own, and that person has the symptoms, which is a fever, a cough, displaying any of those symptoms, I'm sure there are people within the medical profession that would be in a position to transport that person. That person will not be left on his or her own.
Yeah, I know. And then you have the problem of, obviously, it may be an ambulance that may have to go to that person because you don't want somebody getting into a taxi, being in close contact with people. So it's just a simple question because people have been asking me this morning, and I think it's something that needs to be clarified. One other major important point: you're in a rural constituency. We've a lot of farmers down here in Waterford as well. The closure of the marts. This is, to me, a major issue. I don't... have you actually thought this through fully? How are cattle going to be sold?
Yeah, look, cattle will need to be sold. That's the first thing.
I'd agree, but how are they going to be sold?
Well, I spoke to Michael Creed late last night, and the local chairman of my local mart. I've been in contact with him, and look, there is an agreement that it has been very difficult to comply with social distancing within the mart setting. So that is agreed. But the most important thing is we need to keep elements of our economy moving. And one is the primary producers, the farmers who are working flat out. And at a particular time where demand or where an animal is at a certain weight, that's when they need to sell. So look, all I'll say in that without preempting things, Michael Creed is meeting with his officials today to look at a potential solution to that, whether it's allowing a weighing facility or some sort of the people in the industry themselves, they'll come up with a solution here, but I don't want to preempt it, and I don't want to raise hopes either that there will be a specific solution here, but Michael Creed is working with the team on this. I can tell your listeners that.
I can understand that, and looking at how it's, and I was talking to Joe Kelly, IFA, this morning, and different people, there's a lot of concerns about this because, obviously farmers are suffering at the minute. The beef plants, in terms of McDonald's and different places closed down, so there's a lot of cattle, there's a lot of animals on farms, 900,000 on dairy farms, for example, born this year. This, I don't think this has been thought through properly.
Well, look, I think with every action there's a reaction, and one of the things that we're having to do here as a government is to implement actions at very short notice in reaction to the public demand, and the public demand is very, very clear and consistent that social distancing is something that they've very much bought into, and that is what we're doing, and it is causing a lot of disruption, and I'm confident that we'll find some sort of a pathway for the marts, Damien. I really am, because
I hope you do.
Look, I was born on a farm myself. Cows or bullocks are ready at a particular juncture in time, at a particular weight, and whether it's getting rid of weanlings or whatever, from dairy farms, we're in a place where we need some solution here. But I know that nothing will be left behind to find a solution for Michael Creed's part in it.
Okay, Minister Joe McHugh, I'll let you go back to make sure your children are doing the homework. Listen, it's lovely to talking to you, and mind yourself and your family. Okay.
Thanks, Damien.
Thanks, Joe. Minister Joe McHugh there, Minister for Education, talking to us about a lot of matters. So many questions coming in, I can't get to them all. A texter has said that the government has said ambulances would be deployed if anyone who cannot drive, and we understand that, but we're talking about the numbers of people now that are looking for tests. We're going to be talking about criteria in a few minutes. We also want you to text in, please, 083 333 975. Now, welcome back to the programme. We've so much to get through this morning. You've heard Joe McHugh first. We're going to be talking to a professor of orthopaedic surgery in UHW in a minute. We're going to New Zealand. We're going across Cappoquin. We're talking to other people across the world. We're talking to Waterford people about how this is affecting them. A man that's been on with us a number of times so far is Dr. Jeff Plant. Good morning, Dr. Plant.
Good morning, Damien. Good morning to your listeners. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Hope you're well. We won't stay on too long because we've so much to get through, but this is very important. The criteria has changed now. Effectively, Tony Holohan has said that I suppose they cast the criteria a bit too wide, and he's admitted that it's led to a lot of inappropriate testing, and the focus was now needed on priority groups such as people in hospital and healthcare workers. Explain to our listeners, please, the fact now that two symptoms are now needed for the COVID-19 test.
Okay, a couple of issues that, it just shows you how quickly things are changing, Damien. Our guidelines completely changed for us as GPs overnight, and it's really sent us into quite a frenzy of very, very, very busy phone calls. So I just thought to get some messages out to people. Yes, the guidelines have changed in terms of if you need to be tested. You need to have two things. One is a fever. So I'd advise if anyone can't measure their temperature, try and get thermometers. I know they're probably scarce on the ground. But one, you need to have a fever, particularly over 38 degrees. And also have some sort of respiratory symptoms, so a cough or short of breath or sore throat, okay? They're very, very important. Also, then you need to fit into categories I won't go through them because they're quite long, but healthcare workers, those at risk, so diabetes, chronic heart disease, chronic lung disease, things like that. Pregnant ladies are in that category, and a few others as well. So that's very, very different to what it was before, which was anyone with a cough or even with a sore throat just on its own without a fever was getting...
Sorry, we seem to have lost Dr. Plant. We'll get Dr. Plant back there now in a second. Problem with our phone systems here. I think we have Professor Rory McNichol on the line. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me on.
Not at all. It's a pleasure to have you on, and we'll get Dr. Jeff Plant back on in a second. I want to talk to you firstly. Tell our listeners, please, Professor, about your, I suppose, expertise.
Yeah, well, I'm a trauma orthopaedic surgeon working in University Hospital Waterford, and what an orthopaedic surgeon does is basically we're the doctors you see in the fracture clinic if you break a bone, and if you have a more serious fracture or broken bone, we're the doctors who do the surgery to fix that. In University Hospital Waterford.
Yes.
And Waterford is the hub, if you like, in a major trauma system where we receive referrals from throughout the southeast region. And we, as a result of that, are by most measures the busiest trauma hospital in the country.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about specific traumas. Will you just hold the line there for a second, Professor? I think we've got Dr. Jeff Plant back on the line because... Good morning, Jeff, again.
Hi, Damien. Sorry, I don't know where...
No, you're okay. It just fell out there, whatever digital problems there were. I've got Professor Rory McNichol on the line, on the other line, so we'll talk to him about the orthopaedic matters in a minute, and very specifically about how I suppose a lot of people are doing things at home and maybe falling off ladders and things like that. But in terms of the criteria that are needed, Dr. Jeff Plant, can you just tell people this morning what they need to do or what they should know if they are contacting clinics like yourselves this morning?
Okay, so if you have, by all means, if you have any cold or flu-like symptoms, contact your GP. But in terms of who will be referred for testing now, it's people with, you have to have two things. You have to have a fever over 38 degrees. So as I was saying, try to get your temperature measured if you can. Don't have a thermometer, try and get one. And you need to have respiratory symptoms of some sort. So a cough or short of breath or a sore throat, okay? So that's very different to what it was 24 hours ago, which was anyone with a cold or with a cough without a fever could get a test. So this is different. Also, you need to fit into risk groups. So you need to have, for example, bad lungs or bad heart, have heart disease, kidney failure, or diabetes. So you need to have the fever, cough symptoms, and then to be tested.
So they're effectively tightening these criteria quite considerably. Like there have been 17,992 tests so far across the country. 6% have tested positive. And part of the problem is testing is one thing, but actually getting the test analysed is the next thing. That's where the backlog seems to happen.
And it does. And this is my next point, and this is very, very important because things have changed dramatically overnight as they're changing rapidly all the time. If you are currently awaiting a test, you've been told, let's say that you rang your GP and said, yes, a test has been ordered, but you have not received an appointment from the National Ambulance Service yet for a test, you are not going to be getting a test at this moment in time. So there's two options for them, particularly speaking to those people who think they're awaiting a test but haven't been given an appointment yet. There's two options there. If you have no fever and you're reasonably well in yourself, you must keep yourself self-isolated for 2 weeks from when you were unwell. And you need to be 5 days fever-free. Okay? That's one category. Second category, if you still have a fever and you still are quite unwell, you need to ring back your GP to see if you need to be tested still. So that's important. That's very, very important, those 2 points. Is that okay?
That's okay. And finally, like I've had a lot of people calling me personally and asking me to help them out in terms of they're waiting up to 7 days for a test.
Yes.
Is this happening?
As far as I'm aware, patients who I ordered tests for a week ago or even a week ago are only getting tested around now or not being tested at all. So, yes, that is happening, yes.
Okay, so...
The other two things... Sorry, I know you're busy.
You're okay, go ahead. Now, Claire Byrne, just one little point as well. Claire Byrne didn't have a fever, for example. She had...
Exactly, so she was in the old category. Now, this is a new category, okay? So she had been tested and was positive, so she wouldn't fall into the new category now. One other thing that significantly changed overnight, and this is different to what I recommended on your show yesterday, is if you have someone who's been told to self-isolate, or if you have someone with a cold or fever of any type, the new thing, previously family members were free to go about their business as best as possible in terms of social distance. They've been now told, so a family member of someone who's waiting to be tested or has been told by the GP to self-isolate, or someone who just has cough and colds, that all family members or household members are now also told to restrict their movements for 2 weeks. So that's a significant change. That's very different to what it was this time yesterday.
Okay, and again, I'll give out the website in a few minutes that you can check these new criteria. Dr. Jeff Plant, we may talk to you before the end of the week again. As ever, mind yourself and your family, okay, and all your patients. Thank you. Dr. Jeff Plant, you're still on the line. Rory, are you? Now, Professor Rory McNichol, orthopaedic surgeon at UHW, you're on the line there for us?
That's right, yes.
Thank you very much. Professor, what's your message, a message that hasn't really got out there yet or hasn't been spoken about, but I think is a very important message that you have to put out this morning?
Yeah, and I think I'd first of all like to acknowledge that this message is coming in the context of an awful lot of healthcare advice in the media, which is very important, but I'm aware that people are to some extent bombarded with new information all the time. But we do, I suppose, have a message, and the message is this, that as a fracture service and as a service treating patients with injuries, we have seen some decrease in the footfall, if you like, of people sustaining injuries, but we have continued to see people come with significant injuries requiring surgery. And we would call on people, as much as is reasonable, to make good decisions and to try and limit their risk of sustaining injuries. Examples of things we're continuing to see patients injured by would be falls from ladders, falls from roofs. We're all aware of anecdotal reports of a lot of DIY happening, which is a very reasonable way to spend one's time during these strange days.
Yes.
However, I think people need, as much as possible, try and make safe decisions in order to minimise the number of injuries people sustain. And for that, the reason we're putting this message out is that essentially the hospital system is under significant pressure and thus far is coping very well. But we're forward planning all the time. And in many ways, our feeling within the healthcare system, we feel like a nation at war where we're preparing for the worst. And we need to protect people going forward from admissions that might be avoided where they could be exposed to infections, and also to free up resources within the hospital that might be better used for treating patients with COVID-19.
And are you seeing this, Professor, that an increase in accidents at home, as you say, has it become apparent in the last 10 days?
Yeah, that's right, and a pattern is emerging. As I said, although we are seeing some decreases in the general injuries that we see, we are seeing some specific things. For example, people falling from roofs, people falling from ladders. And then, of course, there are anecdotal reports again of large numbers of people, for example, climbing Mahon Falls or other sort of, if you like, risky outdoor activities. And I suppose we're pragmatists. We live in the real world. People are very much burdened by healthcare advice at the moment. It's a worrying time, and fresh air and exercise is desirable. But I think people need to make good decisions, and they need to ask themselves, in any given scenario, are they putting themselves at risk of an injury that might otherwise be avoided, causing a hospital admission? It's
a very good point, because I know during this time of the year as well, with communions and confirmations, we have a lot of bouncy castles and trampolines. That's not happening, obviously, and you get an increase in orthopaedics during those particular times. So this has now been replaced by people doing these jobs that they've been waiting to do for maybe a year or two, and accidents happening. Can I ask you a specific question, Professor? Some people have been texting in the show in the last week. Like, some people have this perception that they don't want to go to hospital. They're a little bit afraid to go because they think you can get COVID-19 in the hospital. Like, this is not true from what I have been told. The procedures in the hospital are so strong, and the cleanliness has been unreal there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose I'd like to also, to some extent, in all the doom and gloom we're talking about over the last few weeks, I'd like also to put out a message of hope to some extent. Working in the healthcare system, I have never seen a mobilisation like this. It's been incredible to experience. There is nothing we have asked for that we could not have. There's no resource that we've needed where the central management or government have said no. There's no upper limit of funding or resources available, and every effort is being put in within the hospital to keep people safe. And it has, unfortunately, in a very worrying time, been inspiring to experience that mobilisation. So I think that people shouldn't be afraid to attend the hospital if it's necessary, but naturally to try and minimise unnecessary injuries or injuries that might be otherwise avoided.
Yes.
A further development that we have is in order to try and decrease footfall and if you like, enhance social distancing, we're developing further a pre-existing system called the virtual fracture clinic system, where we have evidence-based, robust protocols in place where some categories of fractures can be treated in the community under the supervision of a consultant orthopaedic surgeon and using splinting techniques that don't require hospital admission or attendance for removal. And in that way, we're able to treat large numbers of people and avoid them having to congregate, if you like, in waiting rooms. So there's a huge effort and amount of resources going in to protect people.
And finally, Professor, that feeling of solidarity within the hospital system, the nurses, the cleaners, the admin staff, the doctors, everybody working together for the one aim. It must be, as you say, inspiring.
It is. In a time of adversity, as I said, it does very much feel like a nation at war to some extent. And while it's a worrying time, it is inspiring to experience. And I want to reassure people that are listening that as somebody who's been in the hospital system for some time, to emphasise, I've never seen a mobilisation of this type in the past. We're achieving change in days that might normally take weeks or months, even years, in a system that can sometimes be stilted. So yes. I think that people should be reassured in this worrying time and these strange days that within the healthcare system, absolutely everything, every preparation that is humanly possible is being made.
Very well said. Professor Rory McNicholl, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Professor Rory McNicholl there, orthopaedic surgeon at UHW, talking about the procedures that are in place, the cleanliness, all the peoples, the teams coming together. Special shout out to the porters as well, and all the different groups within the hospital system. I was talking to a man yesterday talking about those that work in coronary care area and what they're doing and how great they're doing. So there's so many different areas within the hospital system, and not just the hospital system, community care as well. We're hoping to talk to somebody from community care in the second part of the programme. We are also going to be talking to Mary Keane of the Citizens Information Bureau on her advice slot for people. So if you have questions regarding these particular matters, regarding your employment, regarding going to work, regarding the new social welfare criteria, please do text us in. A very good text there about these new criteria and the testing. Damien, in relation to the new testing rules, I'm concerned that a number of positive tests will be slipped through the net. I was watching Claire Byrne the other night, who tested positive for COVID-19. She stated what she got, she thought was a common head cold, and at no stage did her temperature spike. She said she took her temperature 3 times every day, every day, and never got a fever at any stage. I understand she was in the old system, and now you can only present at a test centre with a fever or cough or shortness of breath. Not all systems present the same. So anyone who doesn't get a fever or cough won't be tested and can potentially have COVID-19. So if we get flu-like symptoms with no fever or shortness of breath, we need to self-isolate for 14 days just as a precaution, ? If it is coronavirus, the person will never know and the true figures won't be accounted for. Thank you, Damien, for all your work and information over the past few weeks. That's from Martina McKeown in Bunman. That's a very good point, Martina. And what Dr. Tony Houlihan, the head of the National Emergency Team, has said, the number of factors have influenced this recommendation for the government, and these include the fact that the number of cases is now over 1,000, an increase in admission to ICU, that's intensive care units, a number of deaths, the prevalence of community transmission, and the number of cases involving healthcare workers. So officials up until this morning cannot say how long exactly the backlog for testing currently is. It stood at the weekend at 40,000. Okay? The average times for processing tests has increased from 12 hours, which was last week, to nearly 26 hours now as a result of the increase in demand. Now, swabs of a virus can stay live for 7 to 10 days, so no samples will expire during the delays. So if, for example, you get a test and you haven't heard a result back within 2 or 3 days, 7 days the virus can stay on a swab. So they're planning to carry out 15,000 tests a day. That's the plan within the next 3 to 4 weeks. So they're just ramping it up now. We'll just have to stay with it, folks, and we'll just have to see what happens. There are so many questions coming in. A special hello to all the switchboard staff in the hospital doing Trojan work. Keep up the great work. Elton John there, The Circle of Life. Keep your comments, texts coming in, your requests for your favourite Disney song. Also, the Gimme a Break competition, GIMME, Gimme a Break competition, to win a lovely 2-night stay away, courtesy of Original Irish Hotels. Now, a very important matter in New Zealand. They have just had a lockdown, and Louise Cusack is from Waterford, and she is in New Zealand. I spoke to her a short while ago about what's happening in New Zealand. Louise, good morning, good evening, good night.
Yes, good night, actually, yep.
It's very late in the evening in New Zealand. You're, 12 hours ahead, is it? 13 hours?
It's 10 past 10 over here now.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, please. When did you leave Ireland? Where's the family from?
We left Ireland back in 2009. We are from Balmaco in Dunmore East.
Okay.
And we came over. I first came to New Zealand when I was 21, and then I brought a Kiwi man back with me to Ireland, and we lived there for 5 years. And we had 2 children and lived in Dublin for a little while, and then we left Ireland back in 2008, 7 or 8, yeah.
And what part of New Zealand are you living in?
We live in Auckland.
Auckland, okay. I was there once before, a long time ago. Tell me, how are things there now? You're now officially in lockdown, are you?
Tomorrow midnight we're in lockdown. So we still have Wednesday to go. So we can go to work tomorrow, gather things, do the last bit of shopping, and see people if we want to see them. And
the idea that lockdown is going to happen shortly, how does that make you feel in terms of preparation, but also emotionally? What preparations have you been doing physically and mentally, I suppose?
Well, we have our little storage of food. Just bought a bit more food for the family. We do a lot of our own. We've got a lot of chickens. We do a lot of, we have home kills over here. So you can, you kill your beef and you put it in the freezer. So we've got our own meat. So we're trying to be self-sufficient as much as we can. Went out and bought a bread maker. Just stocks of non-perishable foods, really.
And what has it been like the last 2 to 3 weeks in particular, Louise?
Oh, I'd even say the last week. Just people are really panic buying, and the with groceries. The freezers have, run short. Deep freezers have gone out of stock. We went to the supermarket this morning. The flour is gone. Even though they say don't panic, what are we meant to do if things like these, is running out? So we just sort of, who knows? Who knows, what's going to happen. But work has closed down. Hopefully people are going to take it seriously. They're saying 4 weeks, could be 8, could be 12. Nobody knows.
And what line of work are you in yourselves?
I'm in the retail business, and my husband is a project manager for the elderly, the aged care facilities.
And
so my job is fine because I've been with the same lady for the last, I don't know, since I've been here 13 years. So she's not wanting me to go anywhere else. So she's happy to pay me. She will apply to the government for subsidies, wage subsidies, which the government have offered, which is, I suppose, relief. They're looking now at the mortgages, giving us a 6-month holiday on mortgages.
Yeah.
Or interest only.
And how much are the government paying people in terms of those that are laid off because of the virus? Is it just social welfare, or are they paying a certain percentage of their wages?
They are paying 80% of the wages.
80.
And then they're hoping, 80%. And I think they're hoping then that some businesses will top up the people's wages.
And how old?
People aren't making money, they're not going to be able to top up the money.
How old are your children? What's their names?
I've got a Keelan, who's 17, Quiva, who's 14, and Sean, who is nearly 12.
And how are they managing?
Oh, they're loving the time off school. So they originally only had 2 weeks left of school, and then they had a 2-week holiday here. But now they're being homeschooled this week, then they will have their 2 weeks holidays, and then I suppose they'll go back to homeschool again for another week and then go from there.
And
I think they're they seem to be enjoying it enough.
How do you think the New Zealand government has adapted to this crisis?
Oh, New Zealand government, oh my goodness. They've been really giving at the moment. I'm just wondering, what are they going to be asking for back? You know what I mean? You sort of have to think, why are they giving away so much? Are they going to want it back after all this is over? There's got to be a catch. To me, I feel there's got to be a catch. But it's been great having living in New Zealand and having my family over there, because they're a bit ahead of us. So I could sort of, rely on what they said to me to know what's going to come ahead,
And if you had any advice for people in Ireland, what would you have to say to them?
Oh, gosh. No, but you're ahead of us, so we're just learning from you guys, really. What I hear from my brother is to take it serious, take the lockdown really serious, and the better we can do it, the quicker we'll be out of it.
Yes.
That's what I think. Italy, I don't know what went wrong there. They just didn't know what was going to happen, I think.
Okay, put me on to your...
So we now have 155 cases in New Zealand today.
Yes.
That was 102 yesterday, so it is getting up there. Not as high as Ireland yet.
And before you put me on to your husband, do you want to say hello to anybody here?
Oh, of course. All my aunties and uncles and brothers and cousins and sisters. They're all listening. Hello from down under.
I'll have a quick word with your husband
sometime,
then.
I'm sure.
Linda,
okay,
you mind yourself, okay?
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, mate. How you doing?
Good, thanks. Good. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. Good.
You're managing to get through this okay?
Yeah, no, it's not really that, it's not that serious over here yet. We've got 150 cases, and we're just sort of, I suppose, just taking it pretty easy.
What about social distancing and being outside? One of the big issues in Ireland the last few days, particularly when the weather is good, is that...
No, mate, none of that's happening yet. We were at the supermarket today buying a few bits and pieces, and everyone's still everyone's still standing right beside each other, but that all changes tomorrow night. So as of tomorrow night, we're not allowed out, basically, unless we're going out for something like medical or something essential.
And do you think the government could or should have maybe tried to introduce this gradually, in the sense of trying to condition people to say, we want you to practice social distancing as a step towards maybe lockdown? Or how do you think they've handled it?
To be honest, I think they've handled it pretty well. We'll basically, as I said, tomorrow night we'll all be locked away. We've only got 150 cases, so hopefully for the month we'll go. It'll be pretty hard, all being locked up, but hopefully at the end of that month we'll all be able to go back to work. Yeah, and it's good family time, I suppose.
And what about the children getting bored?
Well, that's going to be fine. We're lucky we're on 11 acres. So, we'll be all right. We've got motorbikes and things like that to ride around on, so we're not too bad. But, I feel sorry for the other people that'll be stuck in, small houses. Absolutely,
yeah. Well, listen, enjoy yourself, as they say, as best you can, and take care and stay safe. And when was the last time you were in Ireland?
Geez, right. Well, we were in Ireland last year. We normally go over every couple of years, one or 2 years, see family.
Now, nice interview, and thank you very much for all the texts and comments about that. We're overrunning a little bit. Sinead is going to have some news now at 12 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, a teenage boy has been arrested in Waterford in connection with an investigation into coughing on people. Sinead's going to have more on that in the news in a couple of minutes.